I came across Ask Your Mom a number of years ago, and the thing that was so attractive to me about it was not only do I feel that it's a great, important, poignant piece of American literature, or literature period, it's a great, great masterpiece, but in the right-hand margins of the poem, Langston Hughes says exactly how the music should sound. And so it's an ideal job for someone like me who's had a tremendous amount of experience in film, because basically I have the most articulate director in the world sitting on my couch saying, no music here, do something classical, do something jazzy. I got the rights from the Hughes estate. Then I met with Arnold Rampersad, who's Langston Hughes' biographer, at Stanford, and I spent about 4 or 5 hours with him, asking him a number of questions. The first one being, can I as a white person set this poem? Is that okay? And he said Langston collaborated with everybody from Kurt Weill to Margaret Bonds to William Stills. All these people, by the way, are in the poem, all of his collaborators. But we spent a lot of time discussing the poem. We spent a lot of time discussing Langston Hughes, and I really, at that point, began my process of understanding what this text was. Then I did an adaptation of the text, a very rough first adaptation, which, at this point has been changed and transmogrified. And then we started assembling a cast and started really thinking about what the shape of the piece. I put together Langston's playlist, I like to call it, which was all of the music that he had referenced in the poem, and I started listening to that and get kind of myself in his musical head. I did a tremendous amount of research on all the references, going beyond even Rampersad's research on the poem in his annotated Langston edition, and then I started composing, and I really wrote it fast, because here we are, because Jessye basically said, she gave us this date, March 16th at Carnegie Hall. So it was like, okay, the gas is down on the Ferrari, so let's go, baby. When I came upon a problem, a compositional problem, if I really went back to my friend Langston, I always found the answer in his words, and that is absolutely the truth of the process. It's been fascinating for me in that way. The eclectic nature of what Langston asked for is something that I'm very well suited to do. I think that I grew up playing classical music and jazz simultaneously. I studied Bach at the same time I studied Bird. So going back and forth to those two languages is something that's very, very comfortable for me. And I think that my training as a commercial composer has given me a kind of a flexibility and a fluidity that the piece requires. It's about the whole breadth of the pluralism of politics and art and culture. But I think that we live in a society now where we are constantly bombarded with every kind of stimulus, so that we're used to sitting in our car and going like this on the radio dial, right? So we can be listening to hip-hop 1 minute, jazz 1 minute, classical music another minute, NPR the next minute, and that is very much the sonic landscape of this poem. I think Ask Your Mama is not a relic of the past. It is very much a poem in the present. When I first started composing this piece last fall, the political landscape in this country was very different than it is right now, 1 year later. And when I was writing the movement Ask Your Mama, which for me is a real turn in the piece, this kind of the word perhaps enters the poem, this sense of hope and opening and possibility, was exactly the time that Obama was getting the nomination. So I think that we as a country have, I believe, started discussing race meaningfully this year. And it's very interesting, because when Ms. Norman and I were meeting about this 2 years ago, we said that we wanted this piece to be a real conversation about race. Race in America is, I think, the blood of America. It is so much of what this country is, how we deal with each other on this. But now, especially, the poem is unbelievably pertinent and important and beautiful and masterful. I had been interested in setting Ask Your Mama for a long time, and when I had the opportunity to meet Miss Norman, which was a mind-blowing, I still can't get over it kind of thing. there's no way for me to be articulate about how this woman has radically transformed my life. She is a person of the utmost art and soul and grace and majesty, really. But when I had the opportunity to meet her, I just thought, oh my God, I've got to roll the dice and I've got to take this project to her because it's perfect for her.
Before we actually sat down together for the first time, I'd sort of done a little homework and listened to some of the music that Laura had already composed, and I thought, this is most unusual. This is really something that I'm intrigued to sort of take further, because I wasn't listening to vocal music, I was listening to the music from Taken. And I was listening to other things that were available, and they were all instrumental music. And I said, it's going to be interesting to work with someone whose principal idea, obviously, is not writing for voices. And so I was intrigued in that way. And then when she came and mentioned Ask Your Mama, which is just one of the poems I happened at the time not to have known from Langston Hughes, and sort of mentioned to her, as she mentioned today, that Langston Hughes was my mother's favorite poet. And the first poems I ever heard was my mother reciting these poems. And so I was intrigued by that. And then once I read Ask Your Mama, then I knew we were onto something that was going to be very, very interesting and very satisfying on which to work. The jazz singer, the spoken word artist, the hip-hop artists, sort of my part, all of this comes together. All of these are voices of today and yesterday. These poems are timeless because we have in this country the possibility of being exactly what the Founding Fathers had in mind. We haven't reached that ideal yet, but we keep trying. And that's why I feel that his poetry is as valuable and valued today as when the poems were first created, because we're still working towards what this all means, what this idea of democracy really means. Ask Your Mama has legs, as they say, already. And even when people that are promoters of music and presenters of music hear a bit of it, they're already intrigued and interested. So I think the problem that we will have will be just finding enough time to do the performances for which we're going to be invited.